Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today our guest is Burgs. Hi Burgs.
Good morning.
And Burgs, like many of our guests, was recommended by one of our viewers, and we've been talking on the phone and we had dinner last night, and we're just getting to really know Burgs here at Conscious TV a little bit. And he's a real character and a fascinating person. He does some great teaching on meditation, and he's written 3 books, one which is more autobiographical, which is Beyond the Veil, and then 2 which are fairly dense tones, but there's a lot of substance in here, a lot of depth in here. The Flavour of Liberation, Volume 1 and 2, and The Flavour of Liberation, Volume 3. So if you are interested in Burgs, there's some material here you can order and get stuck into. So Burgs, you like to be described as a person who meditates and who shares with others about meditation.
That sounds fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm going to start in your Beyond the Veil book. One part that I pulled out was when you were in Burma, I think it was, your first meditation teacher.
Bali. I was living in Bali when I first started meditating.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were with Merta Ada?
Merta Ada, yes.
Merta Ada.
Yes.
And he chanted this chant which really affected you, and the chant was the translation: all conditioned things are impermanent. When one can see this, with mindfulness and wisdom, one grows tired of suffering and sees the way to end it.
Yes.
That had quite an effect on you, didn't it, the first time that you heard
Yes.
it? It's the Buddha's words, isn't it?
Those are the words of the Buddha. Sabbe sankhara anicca, all conditioned things are impermanent. Yes, I was living in Bali, and I was running a fashion label at the time, and by chance, a friend of mine one evening had said that he was going to meet this healer. Did I want to come? And I almost didn't go, actually. But something clicked in my mind. I thought, why not? I've got nothing to do this evening. I jumped on my bike and I followed him. And I went to this seminar in Denpasar, and I listened to this discourse on meditation and healing given by Merta Ada, whose teacher had just died. So it was his introduction. His teacher had died and asked him to continue to teach. And one of the things that evening, he chanted this chant in Pali, Sabbe sankhara anicca, which translates as all conditioned things are impermanent. And it was 2 things that struck me. One was the familiarity of the actual chant itself and what it meant, that all conditioned things were impermanent. And I was living in a life where I suppose we don't stop often to think that it's not going to be like that forever. And it's easy to sort of assume that everything's going to last. And it just struck me. I suddenly sat there thinking, gosh, yes, what an effort it is to maintain all of this, to hold it all together. And it prompted something in me. I can't say what it was at that stage, but it led me to develop a relationship with him, and he took me under his wing, as it were, and taught me very systematically the healing meditation practices that he'd learned from his teacher. And that was the beginning of my journey with meditation, as it were.
Because at that point you had actually quite some successful businesses, didn't you? You had a fashion business, I think you had some shops, and you were doing quite well.
Yes, I was. I'd had a manufacturing business. That's why I was in Indonesia. I was manufacturing garments for my clothing retail business in England. And it was going really well. It had grown up rather quickly, almost a bit too quickly for me. You know, I hadn't anticipated it being as successful as it was. And I was suddenly found myself in a situation, having started out rather haphazardly as a ski bum designing sweatshirts. I found myself 4 years later with 13 shops around the Alps and around southern England, and with a factory in Java with 120 workers.
Wow.
And I guess I was starting to feel slightly overwhelmed by what had come about rather unexpectedly. And meeting Merta Ada came at a very axiomatic moment, and I suddenly did find myself questioning, what exactly do I think I'm doing?
Mm.
How important really is all this?
Mm.
So it sort of sowed a seed that started a process of quite significant changes in my approach to life, shall we say.
Well, one of the things that I picked up from your book was, and these are my words rather than yours, but you were very total about what you did. And I think one of the things that maybe helped shape that was that you were asked to leave school when I think you were 15 years old, and you
You're
felt...
not supposed to bring that up. Yes, I was. I was sent home from school for misbehaviour when I was 16, yes.
And but your dad, we were a bit worried about what your dad would say to you, but he was very supportive, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, actually, yes. I thought I was in for a thrashing, you know, having been sent home from school. And Dad had a difficult time, actually. He just lost his business and got bankrupt. So he was having a difficult time, but nevertheless continued to support me in my education. I was at a private school. So obviously I felt very ashamed at the fact that I was being sent home. So he came to pick me up at school, and I thought I was in for a thrashing, and he stopped the car on the way home and he said, "Look, I don't know what you want. You know, we're doing our best for you, kid. You know, what do you want?" And I rather, I suppose, arrogantly or thoughtlessly, but it just came from somewhere in me because it was true. I said, "Dad, if I'm honest, all I want to do is to go to the Grand Canyon and play my harmonica. I just learned to play blues harmonica at school." That's what I said. And I thought he'd clip me round the ear or tell me what a waste of space I was. But, you know, he stopped in that moment and he said to me, "Look, if that's what you want to do, you should jolly well go and do it." Mm. And, you know, that had a profound effect upon me, because feeling that we are doing wrong in some way by following our heart is a real constriction upon the conviction with which we feel we can do those things. And one of the things we all, I think, secretly really feel a longing for is approval from our parents. So to be given permission, whether it was going to the Grand Canyon and playing my harmonica, but being permission in some way to be who I was effectively what my father was doing. He was giving me that permission, and that, I think, set me free at a young age, which was a real blessing.
Because he listened to you, didn't he?
He did. He listened. He thought, what's going on with this kid?
Yeah.
You know, he wants to go and play. Funny thing was, when he was young, he ran a sport groups for underprivileged children, and he used to take them out to the countryside. And he was in a skiffle band. He was a singer, and he played harmonica when he was younger, and he gave me my first harmonica. So I think he was probably quite pleased that I, you know, made the effort to learn to play myself. So I guess the part of him was sort of wanting to see me follow my
your dream
aspirations or whatever. Yeah.
And then something else I picked up was that when you, I guess a year or two later, you're still very young, you chose to go to Spain, I think it was, and you just walked for a week on your own from village to village. And again, it was something quite unique that you did, and you were very quiet during that time, and you could appreciate that.
Yes, I can't remember whether that had happened before or after I was 16 when my parents asked me what I wanted for Christmas one year, and I said that I wanted to go to Spain. I just read Laurie Lee's as I walked out one midsummer's day, and I wanted to go and explore southern Spain, and they had a friend out there who was an artist living somewhere in the hills, and I just asked for a ticket. And on New Year's Eve, I just set off, basically. A few friends of mine, we went to Trafalgar Square for New Year's Eve. They walked with me down to Victoria Station, and I got on the train, went down and flew down to southern Spain and on my own. And I had a week of solitude for the first time in my life. And I think I realized that that's what I'd been longing for. And it was a very moving experience. Yeah, just being free enough to just wander and having that much time to really immerse yourself in whatever was going on day by day. Yeah, a very lovely time, yeah.
And I think that feeling must have come back again a few years later, because your business was doing really well. It was before, I think this is before you went to Bali, and you were at a party on a beach, and everything was going well, and suddenly you felt, this is over. You were successful,
yes.
And I guess it was the same feeling of wanting peace and silence, because there was noise, your friends were there, you were successful, and you knew it wasn't it.
Yes, that was actually at the end of Cowes Regatta. We had a shop in Cowes, and we'd sold an awful lot of clothes and made a lot of money that week. And I was playing with the band that was playing at the end of Cowes Week on the marina. And it was quite a scene, as you could imagine. And suddenly I turned round to the audience, and it just felt like madness. I was totally immersed in it, had been totally immersed in it, and suddenly it just clicked in me. I just knew that it was over. I just couldn't do it anymore. And that was the end of it.
And ironically, I gather one of your successful T-shirts, the slogan was, "Make madness a way of life."
Yes, I wonder if I'm paying now for teaching things wrongly to people. Make madness a way of life, yes. Yeah, that was the logo one of the logos that we used on our sweatshirts and T-shirts, make madness a way of life. Yeah. Ironic, really, isn't it?
Well, as I said just now, it's something about you seem to have done things fairly totally. Things came along, you did them, and you somewhere had an innate or access to innate intelligence that you knew when something was over, and you knew that you were open to whatever the next thing was.
Yes, I mean, how conscious it was. Yes, I knew that I couldn't continue to allow this clothing business to just grow. I was feeling swamped by it, overwhelmed by it. Yeah, it was too much. I was losing myself within it. So I knew that had to stop. I'd completely immersed myself in it. Yeah, that's true. I didn't know how to design clothes when I started. I didn't know what I was doing, so I had to learn on the hoof, as it were. Yeah. And then when I think really when I met Merta Ada, something clicked in me. I want to learn how to meditate. Mm. And in order to do that, I was clearly, something inside me was very clear that if I wanted to learn to do it properly, I was going to have to make a commitment to it, rather than have a little go. So, these two things happened at the same time. I dropped the clothing business. It took a while to untangle myself from it because it had quite a momentum behind it. We had to find someone to take on the factory, which was very fortunate. We found an Italian label that took the factory on, so all the machinists kept their jobs. And the leases of it's quite a machine operating. So it took about a year and a half or 2 years to disentangle myself from it and gradually wind it down. But I during that period, I started to commit to learning meditation.
Well, more than that, because you were living with him and travelling with him, weren't you, Ada? So
yes, we travelled together. There were very wonderful times. He was just starting out his time as a teacher. And right from the very beginning, I remember the first meditation retreat we did. We literally set up in a house in Denpasar, and he and I slept in the kitchen, and the students slept in the in one or two, there were 2 bedrooms, and we meditated in the sitting room, and that was our retreat. And that was how that started. And he started teaching quite widely, and I travelled with him for the first 2 or 3 years, I think. Everywhere he went, whenever there was a retreat on, we would go together. So, you know, I learned by his side for 3 years before I then went on to Burma. Yeah.
And how was that to start with, to go? Because I know you meditated for many hours. How was that? Did it bring up lots of emotional things to start with? How was your concentration?
Yes, it's funny. You know, I had lived a reasonably indulgent lifestyle as a youth. So, and I was quite freestyle in my approach to life. So it was a very stark contrast, the disciplines of meditative training. But I really felt a longing for it, to rein in this sort of wild mind of mine. It was very painful to start with, actually. Everyone, you know, thinks that, you know, because I've learned to meditate, it was easy from the beginning. It did become easy, but it didn't become easy during that period of time with Merta Ada. It was still, I could do the meditation, but releasing everything that my body had accumulated from the frenzied or frenetic way that we tend to live our life, that took a while. So there was quite a powerful and profound healing process that happens, I think, to all of us when we first start to commit to the reorganizing of our mind and bring it back into a coherent state from whatever state we've allowed it to be in. The energy structures that we've accumulated in our body, as they become more refined, we become more exposed to the incoherence that we've accumulated within us, shall we say.
So what kind of forms can that take?
Well, I mean, over the years of teaching meditation, I've seen it express itself in all kinds of forms in people. But you've got how it feels physically within you, to be really paying attention to how you're feeling, which is something we tend not to pay much attention to. That can be quite overwhelming when we start to recognize actually how we feel.
So you're talking about the aches and pains in the body?
Yes, not just gross, that's the physical, structural aspect of it, which we're not used to sitting still for long hours. But there's a deeper aspect, which is the friction of poorly organized energy within us that is quite oppressive when we are really just left with it. That's why we're so restless. We need to distract ourselves so much of the time, simply because we feel uncomfortable just being present with ourselves. So there's the structural aspect of your body that needs to open up, and there's the subtle energetic aspects of your software operating system, shall we say, that need to become reorganized. So a lot of changes, and of course the effect that all that has on you mentally or emotionally, not having paid much attention to how we're feeling about things, for example, and then suddenly starting to recognize how it feels to be here. You know, that's quite an awakening in its own right. So, profound journey. Yeah.
So what kind of things were difficult for you at that stage?
What did I find difficult? To be honest, I didn't find it difficult because there was a strong willingness to let go. So I didn't find that that there was a resistance to what the process was bringing about.
So talk about this strong willingness. How did you feel this strong willingness?
Well, for example, that quote that you started with, all conditioned things are impermanent. I think many people, you know, insight, this is what we call insight, seeing how things are, yes, this isn't going to be like this forever. Pretending that it might is one of the things we like to do. Totally acknowledging the fact that we're not going to be here for long, it's a brief period, and everything that's dear to us we're going to be separated from at some point in our lives, whether we die first or they die, and totally acknowledging an absolute truth. Now, that can become a very oppressive overwhelming insight or a very liberating insight. And I think for me it was instantly a very liberating insight, which created a willingness to let go. But because it allowed me to recognize what I was already feeling is I don't need to hold on to this.
So what you're saying is you got the implications of impermanence pretty quickly. Because I know in my own process, the word impermanence I heard so many years ago, and it kind of, but it's taken time to really understand what it finally means.
What its implications are.
Impermanence, everything, and it's not, one understands it in the mind, but it's the integration of that understanding that's the real important thing.
Yes. And that's actually what I see happening a lot when people come to meditate. Usually, or very frequently, people come looking to reorganize the way they are so that they can cope more skillfully or engage more skillfully and have a better life as it is. And then the point at which, inevitably, because the investigation itself puts you in front of these simple truths like impermanence, we have to either acknowledge that that's the case and embrace it, or look at how much we've invested in trying to pretend that that's not the case. And for me, that was a relief, which is why it wasn't a fraught experience. The process of letting go was a very blissful and joyful experience that I'd felt the longing for without recognizing it. You know, when I then looked back, that's what I'd been longing for since I was a kid. You with me? So the point at which we can embrace that is the point at which we can really surrender to the process of letting go. I mean, an example, my grandmother, bless her heart, and my grandfather, he very skillfully and in a very beautiful way simplified his life as he got older. He let things go in how conscious it was, I don't know, but he very beautifully wound down his affairs and simplified it so that when he did pass away, there was nothing unattended to. You know, he just quietly took his leave, and it was very beautiful. My grandmother was always terrified of dying, and she'd never, I think she honestly thought that she was going to be the only person who would live forever. And when it did come to letting go, when her time came, she fought tooth and nail to stay here, and it was a fraught experience. And that was because at some level she had not been willing to recognize prior to that it was always going to be that way. You see? So seeing the truth and acknowledging the truth and absolutely accepting it liberates us when we do it. But seeing the truth and not being willing to accept it, it can become quite overwhelming. Yeah. So that's what we mean by willingness and unwillingness to let go. Yeah. And that's a key part.
Well, yes, and you were hinting earlier that people tend to make themselves busy to get away from the implications of a deeper feeling.
The
busyness of the mind, it takes us away from reality in a way.
Yes, I mean, there's one meditation retreat we do where it's literally a reflection or a contemplation of how do you feel, how do I feel, and sitting with that, and actually being with how I feel. And obviously there's two aspects of it. There's how I feel and how I feel about feeling that. Yeah? And this is mindfulness. This is paying attention. Paying attention. One of the things we do to not pay attention, it might not be very pleasant, how I'm feeling. So we can either acknowledge it and seek to transform it into a acceptable feeling, or one that we are willing to be with because it's not always going to feel pleasant, or we can distract ourselves so that we don't have to feel it. And this is what produces the scattering of our mind and our constant projection out into either an abstract state of mind, an inner world that removes us from the direct experience of what's going on within us, or projection into the future or the past, and all kinds of distraction that engage us in a way that means we don't have to pay attention to how we feel. And this restlessness is one of the things that we're put in front of right at the very beginning of our journey with meditation, because to sit cross-legged on the floor for half an hour with absolutely nothing to do can be a horrendous experience. It can be far from joyful when you first do it, if there's been a unwillingness to be with how it is just to be who you are, or how you feel.
Something else that impacted me from your book was the effect that there was two situations. One I remember, I'm not sure whether you were in Bali or Burma, but there was, you met some pilgrims from Bhutan, and they'd walked for 7 days. They'd walked and slept in the open just to go to watch their teacher teach. They weren't necessarily even going to meet him one-to-one. And I think that showed you, didn't it, the depth of commitment that certain people have for their path, for their freedom, to find their freedom.
Yes, yeah, that was in Sikkim. I'd been up to see one of my teachers, Dodrup Rinpoche, in Sikkim, and he annually has a puja, a meditation. It's the 10-day meditation, and all the monks from his monastery gather, and basically all of his disciples come there annually. And there was a group of, well, there were many people who had come from all over, but as they were packing up to leave, as it was winding down, I saw this group of Bhutanese just trading their blankets for food so that they could walk that 7 days back to where they came from. And I realized, gosh, these people, they've walked 7 days to sit with their teacher and listen to his teachings and meditate with him. And at best, they would get the opportunity to offer him a scarf. And I realized how fortunate I'd been. I mean, I stayed with him and received teachings and, you know, spent time with him. And I realized that I'd done that with all of my teachers. I'd been that close with them in Burma and in Bali and now in India. And I realized that we have so much, we're so fortunate in the ease with which we can come to these spiritual teachings these days. That there's almost a sense of entitlement. I remember when I turned up and I presented myself, it'd been suggested that I went to meet this teacher some years earlier by another teacher. And he said, go and meet this man. He has some teachings to share with you. And when I did find myself there, I presented myself, and of course, you know, the head monk, or his assistant at the monastery, said, no, you can't just walk in and meet Rinpoche. And of course, my initial reaction was, gosh, I've come all this way. Maybe I'm not going to get to see him. And I suddenly recognized when I watched these Bhutanese packing up to leave, gosh, how strong was my sense of entitlement. That I just assumed I would be able to sit with him and discuss my experiences and meditation with him and ask him for teachings. And that really, because it's so available to us, I mean, okay, I had to travel to Burma and I'd lived in Bali and I'd traveled to India, but at the same time, these teachings are available to us if we want them. And in a way, the ease with which they come to us now, there is a danger that we sort of lose some kind of reverence for them. And I realized that act of devotion of those pilgrims who'd walked that 7 days was probably far more purifying than whatever I was going to get by actually sitting and receiving instructions personally with my sense of entitlement. And it really, I don't know, I think that was a profound experience for me, moved me.
There was another situation I remember too where it was when you were, I think, living in this cow shed, I think that was somewhere in India, and there you met someone that had been a young guy, only 23, and he'd been sitting in a cave on his own, I think, for 6 years.
Well,
is that right?
Okay, no. I did meet a young yogi up in India. He had been wandering India for 6 years.
Okay, yeah.
The chaps that you're talking about, or the yogis that you're talking about, I met them. Yes, they at a monastery. I went there on a festival day. It was a holiday day after a festival, and everybody had been sent home. And there was just the abbot, and there were these 5 young monks who'd just come down from 6 years on the mountain, and they'd been up there since they were 17. They were 23. I was probably 27. And seeing them also had a really profound experience on me, because I could see the depth of the practice that they must have been through, the depth of the immersion. 6 years at the age of 17 to be practicing one-on-one with a teacher, and I could see in their eyes that there was something quite extraordinary about
There's something energetic you picked up as well, I think, didn't you too?
Yeah, yes. And I think that's when I realised, right, yes, I'm going to get to the bottom of this if I can. I'm going to put that kind of effort in.
You see, where does that leave us here in the West? And you've mentioned the thing about the availability, and we don't always appreciate it. And you've met these extraordinary people that have done years and years of silent or very protective meditation. And yet, in our lives, to meditate for half an hour a day, people sometimes make a big deal of that. Oh, I meditate for half an hour a day. But it seems nothing in comparison to what other people have done. So how do we put this in perspective in terms of our Western lifestyle? We might have we want to meditate, we find a bit of time each day, but it seems such a small contribution compared to what other people do. And indeed, at one time, you were meditating 9 hours a day.
Well, it's about choices. You know, it's about choices. I had made a choice. You know, I gave up the things that were keeping me bound to that way of life, so that I had the time to immerse myself completely in it. So, you know, you can't have everything in this world. I couldn't have done that had I wanted to continue to maintain my business, for example. But not everybody's going to want to do that. You know, I think it's extremely pertinent and valid and valuable to have a practice that you do for half an hour at the end of a busy day that helps to bring you back into a nicely settled state so you can rest at night. You know, that's extremely valuable if you have a life that is full of responsibilities and commitments and challenges. And a practice like that can serve you perfectly for your needs without having to give everything up and go and live in seclusion. And, you know, I was looking to find where this meditation led. But you don't have to take it to the end to start to get profound benefits for you. So the thing is, I think a practice that is pertinent to the life that you have chosen to live is what we should individually be looking for.
Where have you found meditation has led you?
There's a wonderful Zen story when this yogi approaches his master and said, "Master, what did you do before you got enlightened?" And he said, "I chopped wood and carried water." "And what do you do now that you are enlightened?" He said, "Why, I chop wood and carry water." And I think really that's where it's led me. You know, there was a period of seclusion where, undisturbed by things in the outside world, I was able to enter very deeply into practice and meditation as a process of letting go. Having let it go, I now found myself able to immerse myself in what's going on in life without being overwhelmed by it. So it's kind of a paradox almost, that having let it go, you can, should you wish, participate with it. And so yes, it's just brought me back to, I made a decision when I left Burma to come back and share what I'd learnt. So it brought me back here. I realised that in order to operate and live in our society, I had to engage in the sort of life that other people were living, so that I could relate to their circumstances and what their aspirations were. So in order to do that, I had to be able to immerse myself in that. So I guess it's the chop wood, carry water, you know, chop wood still here.
So the extraordinary becomes the ordinary somehow. They're your words, actually, at one point in the book.
Yes, and the ordinary becomes extraordinary. So my life is much simpler than it was before. I don't have much surrounding me, but I'm not disturbed by things around me. You know, I doubt that I would go back ever to setting up another fashion label. I'm quite happy to be sharing meditation, teaching meditation, for now. Yeah.
Well, one thing that really interested me was how easy you seem to find it to drop into samadhi. Can you just describe what samadhi is for somebody who doesn't know much about it?
Gosh, samadhi. Well, it means different things to different people in different schools of thought. So, but samadhi as a state of unified concentration is a total immersion into your experience, or a total state of concentration, so that there is no separation between what we say the knower, the knowing, and the known. So the sense of you as the experiencer is gone. There is just a deep knowing of what it is, or being with what you are paying attention to. So samadhi, sama samadhi, as in the right concentration as part of the Buddha's Eightfold Noble Path, is a state of absorption concentration where that part of your mind, which we call bhavanga, which is the unconscious arising of those mental states that give this sense that it is you that is the experiencer, comes to cessation. And there is merely a streaming of awareness, or a continuous arising within awareness in a very, very simple, uncontrived state of absorption, or one-pointed concentration. So this is samadhi. It's a unification of the mind with its object. Yeah?
And is that just going to happen in deep meditation, or can that happen also in normal life sometimes?
Now, there are all kinds of different ways in which people would use this word samadhi. Some people would not describe it as a state of unified concentration or absorption, as I've just described it. Some people would describe it as a state in which you immerse yourself, you turn the mind around, we call it, where awareness, the basic state of awareness, which is the basic ground of your being, becomes your reference point, rather than what we normally recognize or identify as our active mind. So we come to see that the mind is merely a conditioned process appearing within awareness, the same way that those flowers are appearing within awareness. So coming to that point of recognizing this basic state of pure awareness as the fundamental ground of your being gradually in stages we learn to immerse ourselves completely in that, and the active mind in stages comes to cessation. So at that point we may enter into a state that we might also choose to call samadhi, which isn't a concentrated state. It's not taking one object at the exclusion of others. It's just resting effortlessly within itself and leaving everything alone, leaving everything to be as it is, so that it doesn't pull attention. It just rests within itself. And the active mind that would seek to label, identify, or have any opinion, view or attitude or any reaction to what it's experienced has come to cessation. Now that flavour of samadhi is defined by what we would call equanimity. The fact that it doesn't waver. In the way that a mirror that reflects those flowers or whatever appears within it is totally undisturbed by what it is it reflects. That basic state of awareness remains utterly undisturbed by what arises within it as an experience. So we might also choose to call that samadhi. So it's difficult. It depends where you're coming from. The complete absorption into your experience, where you pay complete attention to one thing to the point that nothing but that appears in your mind, and that leaving everything to appear in your mind without being at all moved by it. Two very different experiences, actually. Yeah.
So, do you find you're peaceful most of the time now?
Yes, I think the key is to not give yourself too many things to do.
Simplify your lifestyle, yeah.
It's one thing to be able to rest within things and allow them to be what they are. But if you give yourself too many things that need to be attended to, we can still find ourselves overwhelmed. So that peace that we learn to, or that we discover within ourselves, you still have to create the conditions so that you can maintain that state of peace. It's quite vexing at one level to teach meditation, to have many students who are seeking steerage. And for me, what I find personally is that if I take on too many things to do, it's actually quite difficult to maintain that deep state of just being within it, because there are many things that need attention and they may not be appearing in the present. It's all very well to say that the awakened state is to rest effortlessly within the present moment because there's no past and there's no future. But if there are things that need to be attended to that are going to happen tomorrow because you've made a commitment to it, or the next day, you may find yourself drawn out of the present in order to anticipate what needs to be done next. So this very simple state that we discover through meditation, it's the most simple state of consciousness that we're able to enter into, whether it's a unified state of concentration or a resting within the suchness of awareness itself. It's a very simple and uncontrived state, but to abide effortlessly and endlessly into it, one has to allow one's life to become equally simple. It's a choice.
You have to be quite diligent, don't you, in terms of you decide on simplicity and you need almost to protect that simplicity somehow.
Not necessarily. I think as long as you're willing to acknowledge the fact that you can't always expect to be experiencing your most pleasurable states. I mean, in a way, that's unrealistic. If we wanted to do that, then we would, of course, stay in a place where we're undisturbed. But you don't expect to forever be able to rest in that deeply pleasing state of whatever we would choose to call it, if you are continuing to immerse yourself in things that need attention. Again, it's all about choices. The problem would arise if, having made choices, you then resent the fact that it's necessary to engage. So one of the things this is why I always say to people that the refinement of your state of consciousness is not the key. The real key is your capacity to be with what is, regardless of what it is. And that's equanimity, which is really our protector. Which means that when it gets rough, I can be with that. And even if I feel disturbed, that's when what I said earlier about there's how you feel and how you feel about feeling that.
Yes.
You can feel rotten sometimes and all shaken up and all over the place because things might be quite disturbing around you, but you can be okay about being that. We can get too precious about being in this delightful state of peace. You know, the world is not covered in carpet.
Yes.
That's why we learn to wear shoes.
Yeah, and that's also impermanent, isn't it? This wonderful state of peace.
Well, that's the point, which is what
goes everywhere.
That's the where the Buddha sort of appears on the scene. You know, having realized that all these extraordinary states of consciousness that are capable, we're capable of entering into, they're all conditioned states. When we create the conditions for them, we may enjoy them. When we do not create the conditions for them, we may have no access to them at all. And it was this realization that brought the Buddha to that determination. I'm going to find the causal cessation of suffering, because what I've experienced is the momentary cessation of suffering that remains for as long as I can uphold that state. But when I emerge from it, I am still subject to sickness, old age and death, and there is nothing I can do about it. And that's where the Buddha's journey began, from that point.
You know, I'm left with the thought with that it's almost as if we can do the meditation, we can do the mindfulness, but the actual realization, the kind of the dropping of the penny, as we would say in England, is kind of a quantum event that might happen or might not happen. It's kind of, you can do all the right things, but do you actually totally integrate it by doing that?
Lots of questions in that.
Happen?
There's lots of, you've raised a number of different threads there. The first one is that the quantum experience itself, that awakening, when you suddenly get, for example, goodness me, the mind is an illusion, it's a conditioned phenomena. Yes, awareness is the basic ground of my being. That quantum experience may well have a transformative effect upon you, but it doesn't free you from the bondage to this mind. You still have to disentangle yourself from your association with your ideas of yourself, and habits, conditioned habit patterns of mind are very dogged. It takes great conviction and commitment to undermine them. So you suggested that practicing of concentration and mindfulness is one thing, but do we get a quantum experience? I would say that getting a quantum experience is one thing, but are we then going to follow it through, where what it points us towards is something that we've really learned to embody?
Yeah, but you see, if we do all the right things, that's not really a very good term, the right things, but if we're committed to our meditation, we're committed to our mindfulness, to see the entanglement and try and let go of the entanglement, is that going to lead to the integration and the realization, or is there something else of outside our control that comes in somehow?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I think the way that insight unfolds in individuals is a very varied thing. I think a systematic approach to the, shall we say, the reorganizing of our mind will bring at stages a capacity to see things ever more clearly. You know, if you look at a reflection of the moon in a lake that is heavily disturbed, full of ripples and waves, if you didn't already know it was the moon, the reflection would look nothing like the moon. If we try to understand reality through a mind that is already shaken, the reflection of that experience, which is what we actually receive at the deepest level, is disturbed by the vehicle of our mind through which we are interpreting it. So, if we have a quantum experience as you've just described it, for whatever reason, let's say spontaneously something happens to us, but our mind prior to that and after that is in a misorganized state, our capacity to fathom what's actually happened, or even to integrate what might be embodied within or inherent within that, or pointed to by that experience, you know, it might take us many, many years to figure what's actually happened. If our mind prior to that is extremely well organized and settled and mirror-like, we would have a greater capacity to assimilate that experience. So at one level we get a deep knowing, you know, as say a quantum awakening might happen. Somewhere it touches us, but the proliferation of the mind that is still confused may mean that it doesn't, just because we might have seen something that is profoundly meaningful, may not deliver us to a point where we are free of the vexation of this, shall we say, misorganized mind. It would still be a lens that we continue to look through. So I think these quantum experiences, when they come, are informative, but they're not definitive. You know, I always say to people, it's very important that you continue to assume you know less than you think. And even if you feel utterly convinced by your practice, continue to investigate what actually is going on within you. And so, a systematic, again, it's choices, isn't it? You know, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go before you realize it's just a rabbit hole? You know, that remains to be seen. But whether or not you're seeking some kind of awakening or enlightenment, it's actually irrelevant. You will benefit through making effort to reorganize your mind at every level of your life, because the quality of your experience is utterly determined by the quality of the mind with which you engage in that experience, not the experience itself. How rewarding or pleasurable it is to you, or meaningful, is not dependent upon the experience. It's your capacity to land that experience in a balanced way. You know, there's plenty of people enjoying no end of pleasurable experiences and not at all satisfied with them. And there's many people who have very few pleasurable experiences but are deeply settled within themselves. So, you know, we can talk about enlightenment, but, you know, prior to anything like that, just to learn to sit quietly, to pay attention to what's going on around you, and to learn to concentrate. Such valuable things. I mean, how many children can't sit still and be with anything for more than a minute or so these days? You know, and by paying attention to what you're doing and gradually immersing yourself more completely in it, the experience opens up. And very simple things that are available to us all the time start to become moving and meaningful experiences. And our need to seek peak experiences, which is what happens when our mind is very scattered, when it doesn't feel pleasant, or it feels unsettling to be just with ourselves, we seek distraction. So our idea of seeking happiness is through the pursuit of a peak experience. And whether that's a peak experience out here in the material world or a peak experience within our spiritual practice, these peak experiences happen occasionally. If we pin our hopes upon them, we spend an awful lot of time wanting something else or dissatisfied with what is. So, you know, I think the real value of meditation is to learn to organize your mind so that what you're already doing you can enter more completely into, because you'll probably find things that you weren't able to find pleasure in suddenly become pleasurable or meaningful or absorbing in some way.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock out the corner of my eye, and we've got to the end.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been fascinating, and what I'm really happy about is that my wife Renata is going to interview you now in a kind of a part two, so we can maybe go into more depth on what you're talking about, because I do feel for myself this is almost like the beginning of a whole world you're talking about, and it would be interesting to get more depth into that world.
Okay.
So Burgs, thank you for coming along and having a chat
you.
with me. I'm going to show your books again to the camera. Beyond the Veil, which is more autobiographical, but it's also a lot of insights into meditation there, and two quite detailed books on meditation. The Flavour of Liberation, that's actually volume 3, and that's volume 1 and 2, and you can see their real volume. The word volume means volume in this case. And Burgs does run small meditation retreats in the UK. Thanks again for coming along.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you everyone for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we see you again soon. Goodbye.
All right, let's have a look at how we might set up our meditation practice in a way that will give it the best chance of progressing smoothly, rather than something we might find ourselves tiring with as we progress. How you set your meditation practice up will have a great impact upon the chances of it entering into a successful or a pleasing or a well-organized state. So first thing is our posture, and it doesn't honestly matter how you're sitting. It's very useful if you can sit with a straight spine, because that means that the flow of energy between the base and the crown of your head will flow more smoothly. We sit cross-legged because it gives us a stable platform. It's very difficult to fall over, but if that's uncomfortable for you, then sit with your feet flat on the floor, but try to have an upright spine. It's also extremely important to be completely relaxed, because if there's any tension in your body, gradually your mind will stiffen, and no matter how much you're trying to relax, you'll find that your mind stiffens gradually as your meditation progresses. So at many levels, meditation is about learning how deeply can we become relaxed without falling asleep. So we must learn to relax first, and then we can bring energy to the mind from a relaxed state. So let's go through some simple steps that you might want to follow as you set your practice up. And then understand, once you've entered into a well-organized state, how you apply yourself thereafter in meditation, actually, it really doesn't matter. There are 1,000 ways of meditating, and they're all successful if you learn to do them skillfully. If you don't do them skillfully, you're unlikely to get success. So the way in which you set your practice up and apply yourself within the practice is the governing factor, rather than deciding what's the most important object to meditate upon. So let's just set our practice up and go through some simple steps that will help. And again, it doesn't matter whether you have your eyes open or closed. If you're prone to external distractions, then it's useful to have your eyes closed. If you tend to get carried away with your inner world, then it's quite useful to have your eyes open. So let's do our meditation. Relax into your posture. Let the flesh relax around your bones, and review your body for any tension and relax into it. Soften your mind in the same way that you can review the body for tension in your muscles. Review your mind as if it was a muscle, and check that it is in a state of ease. And bring your attention into your body, so that your awareness turns up in the physical present, in the here and now, and stops its wandering around in the past and into the future, and stops wandering into abstract states. Simply bring your attention into the body and feel the sense of shape and form of your physical presence within the space that you occupy. Just to establish a sense of mindful presence in the here and now. Rest effortlessly within yourself in an uncontrived way, resting upon the sense of your physical presence within the space that you're in. And tune in to the stillness of the room around you from within your body. Don't project your awareness out into it, but resting effortlessly within yourself, feel the stillness that rests in the background behind the arising and passing of things, that sense of stillness within which your physical body appears. Relax with attentiveness into that sense of stillness, without losing your sense of physical presence within it, so that you have a fully embodied experience while you rest effortlessly. Fully aware, deeply settled. Rest effortlessly within yourself. Leave everything as it is. Relax your heart and soften your mind. But don't drift away. Remain lucid, mindful and present. Paying attention in the here and now to our physical presence within the moment brings attention from the conditioned state of mind to awareness itself. Leaving the mind to arise and pass naturally within awareness. The same way that the sound of my voice would arise and pass naturally within awareness. Leave it all alone. Thereafter, having established a settled state of present, clear, mindful awareness, we can choose to bring our attention to any object we wish that is suitable for concentration. Or you could continue to just rest effortlessly in a state of equanimity, allowing everything to be without concentrating. Let us bring our attention to the breath and take the breath merely as an object to settle our attention upon and develop concentration. Resting effortlessly. Bring your attention to the breath so that you know clearly the arising and passing of your breath within you. And taking one breath at a time, determined to know it completely without any wavering of attention from the moment the in-breath begins to the moment the out-breath ends. Be utterly disinterested in everything else, with all your attention applied to the knowing of the breath. Settle down your attention until it becomes still. In the same way that you know if your body is moving or whether it has come to a point of rest, so too your attention is moving and wavering and wandering or comes to a point of rest. Rest effortlessly upon the breath and through attentiveness, in a deeply relaxed way. Know the breath continuously, uninterruptedly. Concentrate upon the arising and passing away of your breath. Be sure you do not accumulate friction by gripping your object too tightly. Allow each out-breath to be a complete letting go. So that as each out-breath comes to an end, you're left in that deep, effortless state of stillness from which the breath is arising and passing. Arising and passing naturally within the stillness of awareness itself. Utterly undisturbed by that which it witnesses. Rest effortlessly within yourself. Leave everything as it is. Place your attention upon your object and leave it there. And concentrate. try to remember these simple steps when you set up your meditation, so that when you come to concentrate upon whatever object you choose, you are settled deeply enough that it is just an act of placing your attention somewhere and leaving it there, naturally. May all beings be happy. Bring your attention into your heart and just end your meditation with loving kindness. Feel from your heart to your whole body, to the space around you. May all beings be happy. May all beings be happy. Sukhino wakemino hontu, sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata. May all beings be happy. Breathe in and relax.